Um, here we go. Yeah, as you can see here, I truly believe anyone can master case interviews. That's really core to my philosophy in coaching folks through Leland. And a lot of that has to do with my story, honestly, getting into consulting. So I'm from Canada originally, but came to school in the US originally as a baseball player. Quit the baseball team in college halfway through school and kind of didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but knew I wanted to do something kind of ambitious and open up a lot of doors for me down the road. And so learned about consulting as a path to do that, and really sucked at case interviews when I started. But did a bunch of practice, learned from great mentors at WashU and through our consulting club. And over time had my own experience actually getting a lot better at case interviews and building my own system to actually approach them methodically. And since then, it's just made me really passionate about helping other people do the same thing. So went on to land my dream job at McKinsey. While I was at WashU, actually became president of our consulting club and led kind of peer group coaching sessions even while at school. And then at McKinsey also led case prep for on-campus recruiting and became trained as an interviewer myself. So I could see kind of both sides of the table. And again, just became sort of fascinated with the whole process. And then so since then, I've worked in venture-backed startups doing strategy and operations work there. But yeah, super excited here today to continue passing on these lessons.
Awesome. Awesome, Adrian. Also had the existential baseball crisis at one point, had to transition life a little bit. So very relatable there. And I was actually the year before Adrian at WashU. So also kind of noodled around at the consulting club, and also was almost impossibly bad at case interviews when I first started. And another coach on Leland named Jeremy and I actually worked together, and he got a job at Bain and ended up at McKinsey. So it really is a reps game, and it really is a game where if you can get good targeted like coaching and help early, it can make a world of a difference. As for me, career-wise, I started out of undergrad at McKinsey and spent a couple of years there. Really, honestly, had like an anomalous path. I spent a lot of time with Generation, which is their nonprofit arm, and actually worked a lot on prison reform while I was at McKinsey. But ultimately wanted to do policy full time, and so transitioned to the Chicago mayor's office. And then went off to Stanford for my MBA, and now I'm working kind of on the entrepreneurial side of things. So started this chess business. So if there are any fellow nerds out there who are interested in chess or coaching or learning chess at a deeper level, feel free to reach out. But really have had a phenomenal experience with Leland. I think I've learned more about coaching and teaching through this platform than any other avenue thus far, and I think it's been super valuable. I personally wish something like Leland existed when I was going through some of these recruiting funnels. So I'll stop there and hopefully we can get into things. Oh wow, straight into the case on Adrian. Okay, cool. So maybe we tee this up a little bit and give people a little bit of context. We are Adrian's going to be walking me through a case, and we're going to give feedback kind of at each stage because we know that people who are looking at cases, they're typically coming at it from a whole different range of experiences, and we want this to be both exciting and interesting and iterative learning opportunity for people who are experienced in casing, but also something where if you're a beginner or just starting out, you can totally access things and it doesn't feel like information overload by any means. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a traditional case that you might see in a McKinsey first round or potentially even a second round, go through each stage, and we're going to stop after each stage and provide feedback. Anything you want to add, Adrian?
No, yeah, that's the goal here. I'm hoping to make this accessible and valuable for anyone, depending on, regardless of where you are in your case journey. If this is the first time you're interacting with a case interview, or if you've had many reps and are kind of fine tuning things maybe for recruiting season right now. Other thing that I'll add here is specifically we chose a case here that's meant to mirror, as the title of the event suggests, a McKinsey style case, which is interviewer led, meaning that the actual case that you'll receive in McKinsey interviews follows a structure kind of like the one in this presentation, where there'll be clear checkpoints and clear kind of questions posed to the interviewee that give you a chance to kind of reset, build a new structure for your answer, etc. So you'll see that as we go through the case, but yeah.
Yeah, and you reminded me of one last thing, which is just like, other than the interim feedback that we'll be providing, we want to simulate the actual timing. So like I'm actually like sitting here with a pad and a pen and like going through this with Adrian, and like we'll do like the baked in like awkward silences that naturally follow with like setting up a framework and things like that, because we want you guys to get a feel of what this actually feels like and all the kind of little things that actually have to happen properly in a case. I'm ready to jump into it.
Yeah, let's do it. Cool. So interview hats on now. Welcome, Ben. Let's just dive right into the case. So this is going to be a case about opening up a pizza shop. Imagine that you're working with an aspiring chef who just moved to New York, and they're trying to decide if it makes more sense to get in on the new fad of high-end pizza places with sort of imported cheese, wood-burning ovens, etc., or open a more traditional pizza place. They're set on wanting to open a pizza place, but they want to make a decision about which type of pizza restaurant would be more profitable. How would you go about thinking about this decision for the chef?
Got it. Can I just ask a few, sounds like this is centered around profitability, but there's probably other factors surrounding it. So I'm curious, when you say traditional, like I have my own kind of idea of what that means in my head. Are we just thinking like a run-of-the-mill pizza place that just generally sells like normal slices and pies of pizza? And when we say high end, we think like maybe like a more artisanal place that's, trying to make like a refined style of pizza. Is that about right?
Yeah, exactly. They're both pizza places. They both might sell some ancillary stuff like drinks and things like that. But the main difference is just going to be the traditional place just uses locally sourced materials, and then the high end place is going to import materials from Italy, and might have different topping options, that type of thing.
Got it. And when we think about the actual like constraints of this, are they trying to operate in similar areas in New York City? Is this something where they are entering like different submarkets? Obviously, the market is something we'll want to look at, but curious if like, one of these places is going to be 5 times the size of another, let's say.
Yeah, great question. So the actual storefront is going to be the same size regardless. The sort of the oven and other sort of CapEx investments to start up the restaurant will be actually similar at both places too. The chef is thinking right now about opening the shop in, say, like the same neighborhood, regardless of type of shop. But I think depending on how you feel about the recommendation in the end, we could maybe make some adjustments there.
Got it. And just for context, the reason I was asking is I know that there are, like, when I think of a traditional like corner place, you might grab pizza anywhere from noon to 2 a.m. I have like a picture in mind. And then there are some places that I've heard of, at least in New York City and maybe other cities like LA, where you have like these big, giant, almost like restaurants that just specialize in pizza. So just confirming that we weren't talking about that.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like a slice shop either way.
Got it. Okay. Do you mind if I take like 60 seconds to just like set up a framework and maybe give you a few categories to look at?
Yeah, sounds great.
Got it. Okay, so I'm thinking about a number of different things here, and I think I want to potentially center first on the profitability equation here, since that is central to this case, and then I think I want to layer on a few other factors that I'd want to think about as we try to make the decision between like a high end place and something that's maybe more traditional. On the revenue side of things, I mean, my first thought is, how many types of pizza do we have that we want to sell at each place? My hunch off the top might be that a traditional place might want to sell maybe 1 or 2 slices, while a higher end place might have specialties or things that are a little bit more refined and maybe higher cost. So I'd want to understand the types of pizza and then projections on how much we'd expect to sell. In addition, on the revenue side, I'd want to look at like, are we selling things like, Coke? Are we selling like chicken rolls? Are we selling merchandise even? What are all the auxiliary revenue sources we could generate from something like this? On the cost front, I think this is perhaps even more interesting because I think you have like a range of fixed and variable costs, and I'm trying to imagine myself as like a pizza owner here. But you've naturally on the variable side, you've got something like actual labor. How many people do you want to hire? Will a higher end place require more people to man the store? Are we thinking about having the same hours for each one? Then you actually have like the amount of the amount of pizzas that you sell will also dictate the raw material cost for those pizzas. So if you project to sell 100,000 pizzas, that's something to keep in mind in terms of how much you actually need for each of those pizzas. Probably costs more for a high-end pizza place if you're importing cheese or something like that per slice or per pie. Naturally, there's overhead and utilities. In terms of fixed cost, I would imagine that you need at least like I think of it like keep the lights on costs. Like, what's the actual cost of the storefront? Would that change? Or you mentioned that startup costs might be pretty similar, so maybe it's not a giant.
Oh, Ben, I think we might have lost you. Dalen, Eric, are you still there, or am I the one cutting out?
No, I see Ben paused.
Oh, okay.
I think that's my general sense of categories. Tell me if I cut out at all, by the way, Adrian. I saw my internet was a little dicey there.
I think you cut out just as you're wrapping up, like talking about fixed and variable costs, and then you might have been moving into the sort of other non-profit specific categories.
Sure. Yeah, I think I just was mentioning the brick oven and stuff like that as something else to think in terms of differentiation. In terms of other things to think about, like
oh, Ben, I think we're losing you again.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening.
Hmm.
He's frozen over here.
I also think it's pretty key for us to think through like how we're going to differentiate, how we're going to actually be competitive in this. And if we are opening yet another traditional pizza place on a block where there's already 7, how are we going to stand out? Is it possible to stand out? If we want to open a more artistic, let's say, pizza place, if we're doing so in a neighborhood like the West Village, well, there's actually quite a few of those. So again, how are we going to plan to differentiate ourselves against the competition? The marketing game is also very interesting here because there's a lot of online stuff, a lot of online possibilities. But I'm personally less familiar with how pizza places market online. My limits are around like Pizza Hut commercials, so I'll stop there. But I think by and large, the profitability equation layered on with some marketing and some competitive differentiation.
Awesome. Cool. It cut out super quickly there, I think. But again, so beyond the profitability piece, differentiation, marketing, and was there anything else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think another thing I'd want to think about is just how you mentioned the startup costs might be similar, but I'd be curious like on timeline. Like how quickly can we actually execute this kind of thing? Would one of these 2 solutions be easier or harder than another? For example, just as a hypothetical, would it take an extra 6 months for us to put a wood brick oven in place and get those utilities and everything from plumbing to like the literal electricity set up in a higher end place? I don't know, but that's something I'd want to keep in mind. I'm trying to think as well if there's any way for us to get information or data on various customer bases. I'd want to layer that into our decision, but again, that probably wraps into just like revenue projections in general.
Yeah, agreed. Awesome. Great. Let's cut here. Interviewer, interviewee hats off, and do quick like reflections and feedback. I guess why don't you start? General thoughts on like, what you were trying to do here, and maybe for the audience, like, for folks who aren't familiar with sort of this part of the case, things that you think are important.
Yeah. So I'm naturally we've hit cases that have similar elements to this before in our casing lives, but I would say one thing I always try to do is just like make sure when I'm communicating to my interviewer that I am always answering the question. This is a question of which one of these stores should we open? And beneath that, the 1A question is how could we figure out which one of these would be more profitable than the other? And what data or information would you need to make that choice? So I always say for something that's a little bit profitability focused, I like to start with the numbers. If the numbers for one are just wildly more favorable, we're going to probably go with that option 9 times out of 10. So if it ends up being close, then maybe, some of the nuanced things around competitive dynamics, blah, 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 might be layered in. But once you've got those kind of categories laid out, I think it's worth adding in like a little bit more of the like, hey, like if everything's equal, what are the other things we'd want to look at? It's something like competition, distribution, blah, blah, blah. Like those types of factors, I think, show a little bit more of a well-roundedness. From a style and communication perspective, I think I could have been more concise at multiple stages and maybe gave a few too many examples. That said, the reason I was doing that was when I give a piece of information, I don't want to just like blurt it out. Like I want to tie it back to the why of the reason I'm actually giving you this. And the reason I think this is a valid piece of information to consider, because I don't want you to just think like I'm grasping at straws. Like I have a logic, and I want you to know what that logic is. So.
Awesome. Yeah, agree with all those things. I think on the communication piece too, this is something I think is a potentially interesting nuance between like interviewer-led cases like McKinsey style versus interviewee. In a McKinsey style case, you're kind of going to be presented with the prompt, and then you're going to be able to give your framework, but you might not actually go into each part of your framework, and you as an interviewee are not going to be directing like, I want to explore this branch and then this one and then this one. So you won't have the chance to actually go into thorough detail in each part of your case organically, the same way you might in an interviewee-led case. And then, yeah, I think that was exactly the same thing that I was going to sort of give you kudos for right at the outset with this framework was answer the question. Like, I think a lot of times the framework becomes a lot easier to build, honestly, if you just get super specific about what is the question in this case. You upfront, you get made clear, like, okay, it sounds like profitability and the decision of which type of pizza place we want to open is the core thing. Once you've clarified that and made that super clear in your head, then it becomes a bit more natural to just back solve out of that. Well, if I'm actually trying to answer that question, what are the things I want to think about? Well, revenue, cost, et cetera, et cetera. And then, yeah, agree. The way that I interpreted sort of your answer here was you nailed sort of the fundamental like profitability framework. And then everything beyond that is sort of like icing on the cake. The competition piece, the timing piece, et cetera, just shows that you can actually think about this as a practical problem. But.
Yeah, I think one other piece that we might even, and I think, yeah, we share a similar perspective in terms of like how to set up these frameworks and what makes them good. I think the other thing was like the use of like the clarifying questions up front. It wasn't just me like regurgitating the prompt back to you and being like, so it sounds like we're an aspiring chef. And like, okay, yeah, the guy knows what, you know what you just told me, right? So trying to use, like, I didn't go on like a 2.5-minute tangent about the possible differences in startup costs, because we talked about it for 15 seconds before we actually dove into it. And I was able to kind of rule that area out as a core piece, right? So using those clarifying questions up front, I think, can be a real tool to accelerate the framework and stay focused.
Yeah, agreed. Cool. Should we move to the next section?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Erica, could you hit the next slide? Perfect. All right. So yes, Ben, I think the framework's awesome. Agree that the way you are thinking about profitability in terms of revenue and then costs makes a ton of sense. Before we dive into specific numbers, just almost going through like an inventory of what the potential costs might be. What are the costs that you want to compare between each of the two options?
Yeah, I think the big categories that I'm thinking about are first and foremost just people. How many hours are we going to want to staff, and how much are we going to have to pay each person we're going to staff, and how many total people are we going to have to staff? Those are the figures I'd want to understand and to come up with some kind of like employment or labor cost. That strikes me as really important, and usually is a much larger category than people estimate. I think another piece is, like I mentioned earlier, like I guess we'll keep on the variable front, is just the raw materials. So how much does it cost to actually like make the pizza from start to finish, like to get the ingredients from their original form, whether that's, you know, in the ground or like something that's like produced in a factory, shipped here, and then ultimately, you know, in the form of pizza dough and cheese and sauce and the rest. Again, my thought is around differentiation, that the high-end pizza place may cost more per pizza to produce, just because we may have more ingredients or, you know, more refined dough or imported cheese. So things like that I think are important on the variable side. Depending on how we're thinking about something maybe a bit less crazy, but something around like utilities, I would imagine like electricity or stuff like running water, stuff like that. I would imagine that's a little bit less, but probably there's a monthly cost. Like when I think about my own apartment and what I pay for rent, there's usually a monthly cost for that. So that's technically variable, but feels a little bit fixed sometimes. Terms of the major fixed costs, again, just like keep the lights on, rent, like what are we paying per month? Either it's a lease arrangement or we've purchased the structure and we're making monthly payments in a mortgage style in order to pay it off. I'd want to know what those numbers look like, traditional versus high end. And then I would say that the oven is a differentiating piece. I don't know if this is the greatest oven and like Guy Fieri made it with his bare hands, or if this is something that's like, you know, a regular standard wood brick oven. So depending on what you're using, that could be a big, it's by definition, a differentiating factor. And then the last thing I would say is like stuff breaks. So call it overhead, like things fall apart, that oven might fall apart. You know, plenty of things happen and we roll them under some overhead category, but those are the main categories that I think about. Again, if I had to create a hypothesis around which ones might be more or less, labor, I would imagine if you're running a high-end place, you might be paying more per person because you might need a higher range of skill sets. That feels a little vague. It could be the same. The other one is just higher end raw material costs and the wood brick oven for the high-end place. I would imagine those costs are just higher. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Cool. Let's I think those you basically covered, yeah, all the costs that would go into running a pizza shop. Let me give you some numbers really quickly, actually, for each of those. So labor for the high-end place would be $5,500, so $5,500 per week. And for the traditional place would be $3,500 per week. Utilities would be $550 per month at the high-end place, and then $800 per month at the traditional place.
You actually mind giving me one more second? I would just love to just like set up a quick table just so I can just track all this. I think I've got, I mean, I would love to just like repeat these numbers back to you really fast just to make sure I'm getting it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I've got for labor, it was $5,500 per week, and then $3,500 per week for the high end and traditional respectively. And then I've got, do you mind repeating the utility? I think you said utility numbers.
Yep, utilities is $550 for high end per month.
Per month.
And
okay.
$800 per month for traditional.
Okay.
Cool. Wood is, so you asked about the oven. They're using wood burning ovens in both places. The high-end place would need 3 cords of wood per month at $400 per cord.
Okay. Would it be possible? I guess that's the same as saying like 1,200 per month.
Yeah,
approximately.
Exactly.
Okay, 1,200 per month. Okay.
Exactly. And then, sorry, actually, I misspoke. The traditional place is not going to use a wood burning oven. They're just going to use a gas oven, so they don't have any wood costs.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. Then rent is going to be $6,000 a month at the high end and $5,000 a month at the traditional place. The actual pizza bases are going to be $4 each at the high end place and $3 each at the traditional place.
Okay.
And then toppings are going to be $100,000, let's say, per year at the high end place, and $25,000 per year at the traditional place.
Okay, sorry, maybe I missed a number. You said $4 for a pizza base, but how many pizza bases do we need?
Great question. So 72,000 is the estimated total pizza bases for high end, and then 23,000 for traditional.
Okay, and is that per month or is that for the whole year?
Whole year.
Whole year. Okay, got it. Okay, and you said 100,000 and 25,000 for toppings, high end or traditional.
That's
okay.
right.
Got it. Is that it in terms of cost?
One other cost. So there's going to be like we discussed, like some ancillary items, drinks, things like that. Let's say that costs $25,000 for the high end place per year, and 30,000 at the traditional place.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So labor and pizza bases aside, we're largely operating on a monthly basis for some of these costs. A couple of them are kind of lump sum. I think unless there are like any other multiples, I think we probably have just about everything we need here to calculate just the difference in annual cost. And then potentially, I would imagine we would want to at some point also consider revenue, but would it be all right if I just started like walking you through like how I'm doing this?
Yeah,
So
I think both of those are great. Comparing the annual cost and then getting to revenue.
Yeah, so I mean, much like a traditional case, like this is kind of how I would set it up. I don't know if folks can see this, but it's really around unit cost and just dollar figures attached to each. Can you see that okay, Adrian?
Yes.
Okay. Bottom line, it's a table. So I think in terms of just calculating this in a very simple way, I'll start with the labor cost, for high end. I typically like to do math aloud, so you stop me at any point if you're not following what I'm saying, but 5,500 is the weekly cost for labor, and multiplying by 52 is a little annoying. So what I'll do is 5,500 times 100 is 550,000. Divide that by 2 to get 275,000, which is 5,500 times 50. So we've got 275,000, and then if we add 2 more 5,500s, that's another 11,000. That gets us to 286K on the high end place. And then for traditional, I'll do the exact same thing. 3,500 times 100 is 350,000. Cut that in half, get 175,000. Add another 7,000. That gets you 182K. So already we're seeing a pretty substantial difference. Actually, even when we were talking about it before, that's much larger than I would have expected between labor costs. It looks like a massive differentiator, probably one of the largest, if not the largest. Utilities, just moving down the list, utilities is a little bit smaller in scale. 5,500 plus 1,100 is around 6.6K for utility costs for the high end place. 800 times 12 is just 9,600, so 9.6K. So utility slightly higher for traditional, but again, marginal relative to the labor cost. The wood brick oven is 1,200 times 12, which is 14.4. Add 2 zeros is 14,400 for the high end place. So that gets us, and we have nothing for traditional there. Rent, we have 6,000 times 12, that's just 72K. 5,000 times 12 for the traditional is 60K. Slightly higher for high end, curious why, but again, relatively small. Everything is feeling a little bit trivial relative to labor so far. In terms of the pizza bases, now we have another like massive differentiator. 4 times 72K times 2 is 144, times 2 is 288. So 288K for the pizza bases for the high end place, and only 69K for the traditional place. So that is a huge difference of over $200,000. Toppings is, or whatever we had, like, yeah, toppings for the pizza is 100 versus 25K. Ancillary costs are pretty similar. Okay, so overall, I'm just gonna add these together just to run down so you get the overall annual cost.
Perfect.
We've got 286 plus 21 plus 72, 288. Okay. Right. I ended up with like, would you like exact numbers or do you want like is rough? All right.
If you can get to exact, it might be helpful once we get to calculating total profit margin. Margins on the pizza place are not going to be super wide, but
fair enough. Okay. So for the high end place, 2 minus, okay. I ended with 792,000 annually, and then moving over to traditional, 242 plus 9.6. 3.6 at 375.6. So it looks like the difference in cost here is 400. Wow, that's substantial. Is 416.4. Okay, if I have that right.
yeah, don't know the exact on the difference, but
okay, yeah. So sorry, just stepping back, it seems like the toppings, the bases, the actual raw materials to create the pizza, and the labor costs are really the drivers of the difference here. So if we are considering launching a high-end place, trying to make this decision, we'll really need to have to drive simply just much more revenue per pizza or per unit in order to justify such a higher cost and higher variable cost as well. So I'll stop there, but I think that is those are my main takeaways.
Awesome. Cool. On that note, yeah, we should get to the revenue piece in a sec, but let's interview hat off again and talk through this. I can share from my perspective first. So a couple things. First off, I think creating structure anytime you're gathering data during the case is super important just to make sure you're staying organized. And like you said, literally just a simple table is all you need. And one gives the interviewer confidence that you're actually digesting the data and getting ready to calculate with it in a sensible way. And two is literally just going to make your life so much easier when you have to go do your calculations. One thing that I think was super important as you were going through the section that I really loved was a constant push to like, not just do the math, but actually drive towards insight and drive towards recommendations and hypotheses. So, as you're getting the labor costs, you realize like, oh, this is going to be a massive driver. This is going to be hugely important. And I'm going to want to understand why. I want to understand what's driving the difference. Once you do the calculations at the end, you're calling out which are the biggest drivers and again, calling out how you're going to want to dig into that deeper. And then lastly, as you're going through the mental math, really loved how you just like talk through things out loud, and again gives your interviewer actually an opportunity to course correct if you have any mistakes in the math. You didn't. You were totally clean on this one. But actually, it can be uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of folks to do mental math out loud. But doing that actually can give you confidence as you're going through the case that even if you mess up, your interviewer's on your side and they'll be able to correct you or know where you went wrong along the way. So. Yeah, but no, got through that section super cleanly.
Yeah. No, I think the last point I'll lean into a little bit because one of my actual interviews, my first round, it was my first case. I was mid botching the math. And because I was talking out loud, the question was around like calculating literally for boxes, the surface area of boxes and how many we wanted to ship and blah, blah, blah. And I was talking through it out loud, and I actually caught myself right before my interviewer started interrupting me. And I realized what I was doing was calculating the volume of boxes as opposed to the surface area of the box, which is actually part of the design of the case. And why it's so tricky is because when you imagine a box or a cube, you start to calculate length and width and height. Okay, great. And you keep moving and you rush and you don't realize that actually volume is literally everything you're not supposed to calculate. It's literally all of the non-contained pieces. I would say I usually 1 out of every 2 cases, I would say I make some tiny, I wouldn't say a math error, but like I should, by going through it out loud, like I often at this point catch my own double takes when I miss something. But if you're making regular mistakes in the math, know that A, you're not alone in doing that. But B, just talking to everybody now. but B, that it's talking out loud actually will help you solve the problem. At first, I don't know if you experienced this too, Adrian, but like when I first was told in the casing process, like you have to talk out loud while calculating, I was like, no, that's hard. I'm gonna like try to focus and just get it right. And maybe that's what you have to do at first, just make sure you're getting it right. But eventually it becomes a mental kind of just a mental tool for yourself to be like, oh yeah, like, wait a minute, like even when I was calculating even the unnecessary difference between the high end and the traditional pizza places, I was like, I almost said 417.4K, but I was like, oh no, wait, that would be, that would be I'd be $1,000 off. So just by saying it out loud, it actually slows me down where I might be predisposed to rushing. But yeah, I think those are good points overall.
No, that's a great point. And yeah, this is something where I think, at least for me, coming into casing and like casing with more experienced folks, I was super intimidated at first seeing people run through mental math. And I mean, honestly, like going through this, like you got through that math super cleanly, super easily. And you have these tricks of like, you want to get to a week, multiplied by 52 weeks. So you multiply it by 100, divide by 2 and add 2 more weeks and things like that. I think really when you boil it down, all case math is just algebra, right? It's just adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. No one's going to ask you to like find the integral or like the second derivative or whatever. And literally what helped me was just practicing algebra. Like I literally look up high school or like elementary school algebra worksheets and then just try to go through them without a calculator and while talking my math out loud to like myself in my room. And I think all of us have those skills. Like if you're in a McKinsey, Bain, any consulting interview, like you have the capabilities to do that kind of math. It's literally just kind of reactivating those muscles because like a lot of us don't have to use them in daily life anymore.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I do think that like using them in daily life is actually a useful thing when you're in the casing process. Like you don't have to bother your friends with like, oh, I can calculate the tip in 5 seconds, but like, do it like in your own head. Like if you want, like calculate the tip, like figure out like small little things. But I do think like just doing this, like getting the practice of like, hey, like I'm going to make the stupid table. Like I'm going to sit there and I'm going to just write simple things. Like I barely wrote any words here. It was largely numbers. Like don't try to write out like wood, brick, oven cost, just put oven, right? And for like week versus month, don't get caught up on, what the label should be for the column. Just put the unit, like just write the word unit and then put 52 versus 12 versus 12 versus 1, right? So I think little things like that comes with practice, but over time you'll realize like all that mental space that you were originally using for, hey, what do I label this with? How many words should I use? That gets reallocated to actually being able to do things like tying back the numbers to the original question, thinking critically about what these things actually mean. So, all right, let's keep rolling.
Awesome. Cool. I'm doing a quick time check and thinking about how much detail we want to go into.
Mm-hmm.
So I have about 13 minutes. Actually, yeah, let's just keep going through as normal. And so we could stay on the slide for now. All right, you just calculated the total cost of each option. Identified that basically the high-end pizza place is going to cost about almost more than twice as much as the traditional place. You're pushing to, we want to figure out profitability. We need to figure out revenue. So why don't we do that next? Similar to the cost side, you were asked an upfront kind of in your framework about the different SKUs or the different types of things that would be sold at each place. Let's just assume that there's 3 types of things that each pizza place sells. Number 1 is a plain pizza. Number 2 is a specialty pizza. And let's just assume that means some sort of pizza with toppings. And then number 3 is additional stuff, drinks, sides, etc.
Got it.
Got it. Awesome. So the high-end pizza place sells plain pizzas for $10 each.
Mm-hmm.
And they're expecting to sell 22,000 plain pizzas this year.
Mm-hmm.
The traditional place sells plain pizzas for $13 each and is expecting 11,000 sold.
Just confirming, the plain pizza at the traditional place is $3 more than the plain pizza at the, okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, good observation. The specialty pizza at the high-end place is $12 each. And they're expecting to sell 50,000. And the traditional place sells specialty pizzas for $17.50, tracking to sell 12,000.
Mhm.
And then the high-end place expects to sell $70,000 worth of additional stuff. And the traditional place, 90,000 of additional. So yeah, what can we learn from this?
I will say, totally confused about the pricing. I would have expected the opposite, in terms of like how we're trying to price things. It seems like, and I'll start calculating in a moment, but it seems like the high end place is going for a volume play, while the traditional place is pricing, or at least the traditional place we expect to be creating is pricing itself at a very high, on a higher end than a high end pizza place. So it's an odd pricing volume scheme here, but I will dig into this and try to come up with, I think, the margins for each, in order for us to figure out A, which of these two solutions is more profitable, and then B, maybe we can start thinking about what levers we might pull in order to potentially even maximize the profit further. So just looking at this very quickly, the actual total annual revenue for the pizza or the high end place is 820,000. So I just did 600,000 plus 220,000, plus the 70,000 for just the lump sum, the auxiliary stuff. So that gets us to 890K. And then bringing down the 792K of cost, our margins for the year are 98K. A lot of thoughts on that number, but margins there are the 98K for the high end place. And then when I look over at the traditional place, I'm seeing for the plain pizza, 13 times 10K is 130,000 plus another 13 is 143K. 1750 times 12,000 is a nice friendly number. So that is 175,000. I think plus, let me see if I get that right. Yeah, 15,000 plus 15,000 plus 195,000. Should get us 210K for the specialty pizza. I was just splitting up the numbers there in my head. 210K, which gives us a total of 353,000 plus the 90,000, so 443,000 for the traditional place. Taking off 375.6K to get the comparable margins here, we end up with less, basically, 68 minus 6, 67.4K. So it looks like the high-end place is considerably more profitable. And I think the strange part here, when I step back and think about like which one of these makes the most sense, the traditional pizza place, and I'm going to use a little bit of personal experience. You tell me if this is it's just me superimposing, but $13 for a plain pizza, I've seen cheaper. And I think that there may be a lever on the traditional side for them to go for more volume. Maybe if they sell for $11, they can double their volume and then overall have considerably more revenue. If they lower the price of their specialty pizza in a similar fashion, they could do that. And generate, let's say, 20,000 sold as opposed to 12,000. We don't know what the elasticity of the price and demand relationship here is, but complete inverse on the high end place, which is, should they raise their prices and actually mirror, like look at the market and say like, hey, like if we have like traditional places that are selling for a higher price, maybe we want to match or exceed them and pitch ourselves as the high-end place we say that we are. So, overall, if I'm looking at these two, and these are our two options that are fixed literally in stone, I would say that we should go with the high-end pizza place because it is nearly or a little bit over $30,000 more profitable per year. But a lot of interesting possible levers to pull on both sides.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Pause again. Yeah, I think you nailed right off the bat, even as I was just giving you the numbers, like the oddity, like, okay, why is this premium pizza place charging less than the traditional pizza place? And then I think the suggestion naturally follows, like, it seems like there might be room to increase price on the high-end place or increase volume on the traditional place. Yeah, not too much more to add there, honestly, beyond that piece and everything we covered on the cost side.
Only thing I would just would toss in here is, like, in general, if you have a moment in a case where you're like, that's kind of weird, like, that's usually a good insight. Like, that's usually something where you're like, that's going to at least be fruit for a good discussion, maybe, a hole that you want to dig into a little bit more. But yeah, if there's anything else, I'm happy to wrap this up.
Awesome. Cool. Erica, you mind going to the next slide? Cool. We touched on this a little bit already, ways you can increase profitability, but maybe just to show folks like what a brainstorming question would look like. Let's say, okay, you've identified you want to suggest going into the high-end pizza place. Let's focus on that one for now. Literally just brainstorming as many ideas as you can, like unedited. What are some ways you would think of to increase profitability for that high-end place only?
For the high-end place only, yeah. Yeah, so I think one thing that I always appreciate when I go to places that I love and that I frequent, high-end or low-end really, but some kind of like loyalty or like rewards program. And maybe this is a little bit too of my consulting side coming out, but like, hey, if you gave me some kind of like frequent flyer program for going to a pizza place, like, I'd be much more likely to come back. If you showed me like, hey, for every 3 people that I refer to the restaurant, you'll send me a t-shirt. Awesome. I think things that are both at the intersection of getting your brand out and also rewarding frequent or returning customers, that stuff feels really high yield. 2 is on the marketing front, like, what is the potential for us to like differentiate ourselves on social? A lot of pizza places do this, a lot of bars do this, restaurants, they get celebrities to come and advertise, take a bite of their pizza and put it on their social. So some kind of influencer partnership, or maybe a broader partnership with other restaurants and bars in the area, I think could be a nice way to integrate yourself with the community, but also start to create a larger presence or a larger following in a more traditional social media way. 3, I think, is like, we had this like lump sum category of like other stuff. Like, so much can go in that other. And I mentioned earlier, like, some kind of like line of merch I think is pretty cool, especially if you do manage to establish a brand. You can, hey, like, people will buy like a cool hip like pizza like sweatshirt or something like that at their favorite place. Like, why not? They might buy like a little like bobblehead figurine of like the local chef, right? Stuff like that could be kind of interesting. I think 4, and maybe this is less like exclusive to a high-end place, but if you can like partner with like apps like DoorDash and Seamless and Grubhub and stuff like that, and Uber Eats, like, you can create not just a delivery program, but like you get your brand on these super high conversion platforms that just do more business for you. So whether that's simply just more eyes on the platform for people to go and pick up pizza, I think that's it's just feels like a no loss situation. Maybe they take, Uber Eats will take like a small cut or something like that. But those feel like a series of interesting levers potentially. Curious if you have other thoughts, but like those are a couple that jump to mind.
Awesome. Yeah, all great ideas. Cool. Real quick before we move to the final recommendation piece, just one tip I found helpful for myself in these brainstorming sessions. First of all, actually, to frame this up, you literally, like, this is the kind of question you can get in a McKinsey style like interviewer-led case, like literally just ask for ideas. And you should feel like sort of no holds barred, like get as creative as you can, generate like volume of ideas. Don't feel like every single idea you put out needs to be like refined and like super tailored. Something that I found actually helped me generate that volume was creating constraints or creating like framework for my brainstorming answer sometimes. So like for a profitability question, can think about revenue specific ideas, then cost specific ideas. And for me, at least, actually, the more specific I made the brainstorming question for myself, the easier it was to come up with a bunch of different ideas. But yeah, that was the only piece I had there.
Yeah, I would add two other things that I found super high yield. Is one, imagine the supply chain. Try to think about all the layers of the supply chain when you're thinking about like levers that you can pull to make the business work better. So whether that's like, hey, maybe we source the materials not from Italy, but from XYZ place, or maybe we combine like we like have a streamlined trucking operation that gets us things much more quickly and much easier. I don't know. The other one that I always imagine is kind of like be the customer, like walk into the store, imagine what the purchasing process would look like. Now that I'm thinking about it, like maybe it's like easier to go digital and like make the payment process a lot faster. You have no idea what it's like to run a pizza place for some people, but like going through that, like I've been on a lot of lines for pizza. If you can get through customers and move them quickly through a line, like that can be super high value as opposed to people leaving the line or looking at the line and saying, oh, that's too long, I'm not going to go. You don't even know how many people you're missing. So just things like that are other tools that I've used to do that. But final rec, let's do it.
Yeah. So imagine you're talking to the chef now and you want to share what you found and what you recommend. What would you tell them?
Yeah. So overall, everything that we've looked at, wide range of factors, I would recommend going with the high-end pizza place. My main reasons for this, first and foremost, from the projections that we've done so far, it looks more profitable. Secondly, given that we probably could pull levers on both the traditional and the high-end place, to me, it makes a ton of intuitive sense that we could find a way to increase our prices as a high-end pizza place. And we probably want to A/B test this or do a little bit of experimentation to figure out just how elastic our demand is relative to our new prices. But we could probably find a way to charge more as a high-end place with higher cost and potentially stretch that profit margin per year well into the six figures. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. And the last thing I would add is, especially if we're entering a competitive New York City pizza market, it would, at least intuitively, be a lot easier to differentiate as a high-end pizza place than it's just another corner shop. So those would be my three main reasons for going with this, but certainly cases to be made for both.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the case. Again, interviewer hat off. General reflections, or actually recommendation specific. I think the key thing here is, again, just answer the question. So the sort of standard, I think, format for recommendation is lead with the answer. So literally make sure your first sentence, like Ben did in just recommending the high-end place, is just an answer to the question that the interviewer is posing about the case. And then your supporting evidence behind that answer, which Ben gave again, three main reasons why he believes in that answer. And then if you see any, or if you actually believe in any, like sort of risks or other ideas related to the answer, can be layered on after as well. But yeah, I mean, as I go through this, like in a live case, I will literally just, it's okay to ask for like 10 seconds here if you want, if you don't have the answer kind of primed and ready. And I would just literally look over the paper I have where I've done all my work, look at the things that maybe I've circled, or where like the end node answers were to each of the questions along the way, use that to inform like, here's my answer. And then the pieces of evidence are literally just the things that you walk through during the case along the way. And so you can just list those off, and it's just about basically consolidating and organizing all the things you already talked about in the case at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And a great point around taking the 10, 15 seconds and saying like, okay, like, do you mind, like, you can even ask, like, there are certain phrases that like would be indicative of the fact that you need to answer right away. Like if you ran into the CEO in the elevator, like if that's how the recommendation is presented to you, like you kind of need to talk right away because you have 15 seconds. If it's like, hey, like, we'd love to hear, like, given all the information, like, you know, what would be your final recommendation to the chef? Like maybe you can take, 30 seconds, but that's that. I think moment. I mean, hopefully this was helpful for folks, but I think Erica, yeah, you wanted to end
Yeah.
quickly with
Let's do it. Thanks so much. I don't think we'll have time for Q&A, so we'll go to the final word. Big thanks to Adrian and Ben. You both did a fantastic job. I know I learned so much following along, and I appreciate how you formatted it through, doing the actual case and providing feedback along the way. So huge thank you to each of you. Everyone in the audience, please feel free to book time with Ben and Adrian. This is what they help clients with full time on, practicing cases, getting better, delivering results, the math, whatever it may be. So go ahead and book through their profiles. You have the link here as well as the QR code. And if you're not sure where to start and you're interested in getting help from our team, you can schedule a free strategy call with a Leland team member, and then we'll help you understand how you can better work with one of our coaches to, achieve the goals you're looking to achieve. And with that, thank you so much for joining. We are right at time. So appreciate everyone joining in. And again, if you haven't already, sign up for Leland, and we will keep you in the loop for many more amazing events as such. And again, huge thanks to Ben and Adrian, and look forward to working with each of you in the future. Take care, everyone.
See everyone.